Serious. Police, security guards, paramedics, etc. Have you ever been called out to only realize it was a seemingly paranormal incident? What happened? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Unarmed security for a residential building here. This is extremely tame compared to some other stories here, but this is a pretty salient subject and I have evidence. My site has a rooftop pool, and it's really one of the only major things the management gets anal about when it's supposed to be closed. On a chilly night not too long ago, I was posted up in the rooftop stairwell staying warm when I hear a crescendoing fit of laughter that goes to the point where the laughter is gasping and choking. Kinda weird, but not a big deal considering that people throw parties and whatnot all the time, and I could tell it wasn't close enough to be someone horsing around in the pool. Then I just start hearing a bunch of shrieking, and the source of the noise is moving around. At this point, I step out, and I realize it's coming from the rooftop itself, locked up and only accessible by non-security by scaling a concrete wall. The noise stops, and I try to start zeroing from where exactly on this dark, slippery, cold-ass roof the noises were coming from. Then I see some footprints on the roof that were not there before. Barefoot footprints with no heel print, tiptoeing. Footprints that are dirtier than the surface of the roof itself. Noped my way right back inside because it was an hour before clockout. I'd much rather have something paranormal than a meth head on the roof running around with no shoes. Graveyard shift security at a hotel casino. We got called to the top floor of the hotel because people from the floor below were calling in noise complaints. I was the FNG, so I had a trainer with me when we went up. Dispatch told us over the radio that there was nobody registered on that floor. So cool, just a few idiots being idiots. We got up there and every single door on the entire floor was wide open. Anyone who has been to these hotels knows that you can't just accidentally leave doors open because they close by themselves. They weren't propped open or anything, just open. We asked dispatch if engineering was doing any work up here or had anything going on during the day. After a few minutes, they told us they called engineering and they said no. We just noped out at that point and said there was nobody up there. Marine stationed in Japan back in 2010 to 12. I was military police. One night around 2 to 3 a.m., we hear over the radio, any unit seeing the light over the water south? It was a Marine air station based on the southern tip of Japan. We had no flights coming in or going out that night. Everyone knew there shouldn't be a light flying over the waters. So, about 3 patrol cars met up at the airfield where there was a way better view. Sure as shit, there's a light sitting out over the water blinking slowly off and on. Some guys try to say it was a star, so we had traffic control cameras from dispatch zoom in on it. Turns out it was slowly moving out of the cameras. So, while we couldn't tell if it was moving, the cameras picked it up. We sat there kind of amazed for an hour before it went away. As we were getting back into the squad car, I took a last look at the night sky and saw a small light dart behind some clouds in a movement that didn't make sense. I didn't tell the other guys, just thought there's no way they would believe me. Months later, I was running on the seawall and stopped to lay down and catch my breath. Again, saw a light, watched it drive into some clouds and then disappear. That was around the time of the tsunami and Fukushima. Super weird. You might not believe me, but at Universal Studios Hollywood, the lower lot we use golf carts or Ford Explorers to patrol. There is a golf cart that drives itself at night. We have the number of the cart on camera, and I shit you not, it's been non-operational for over 6 years. Someone wrecked it on the lot. Thing drives around Jaw Lake and residential areas at night. Scary shit is I patrol up there a lot for my swing shift. Never seen it, but cameras catch it zooming past us when we're driving, LOL. I am a police officer in a large city. There are housing projects in my sector that house low-income residents and also some suffering from mental health issues. There's an elderly Haitian woman who calls late at night and swears she can hear ghosts and voodoo spirits in her residence. The first time I showed up with my partner, I told her I would go in and speak with the ghosts and close the bedroom for about 5 minutes, then opened it and she hesitantly entered with me. I told her I asked them to leave and they need her permission to come back. She celebrated and said she can no longer see them and thanked us. This woman is otherwise quite articulate and intelligent and always refuses medical help. She will call 911 periodically every 3 to 4 months for similar reasons, and I'll go in with a water bottle with no label and go in and have her point the location where she saw them and sprinkle some holy water in the area, and she thanks us and offers us food. We always politely decline and exit the residence. Until my roommate remembers his Reddit or makes a new one, not a responder, but lived next door to one who is very famous in our hometown for his alien abduction, but there are other stories too. This all went down in the 80s, rural England, and my memory of the exact details are fuzzy. Been a while since anyone has bothered discussing it. Small hometown and everyone knows and is over it. The alien abduction story is that he was on the way back from a call out, saw some odd lights on the road ahead and had to stop, a one-track road. He went to investigate the lights, as any good police officer does, and next thing he knows, it's a half hour later and he's back in his car seat, car facing the other way. Some odd substance on him, no lights to be seen. The police dispatch also confirmed that his radio frequency just disappeared for that half hour. The substance was tested and didn't match any known profile. I really have no idea what that really means or what tests were. At around the same time, this officer and some others were called out by a farmer whose cows had disappeared. Yes, very stereotypical cows in a tractor beam story, but the farmer reported them missing. Multiple police show up, gate is locked, and no cows. They all decide to drive around looking for the cows. The paranormal magnet officer reports that thing where you keep trying to drive somewhere but always end up back where you were when it shouldn't be possible on his route. But they all convene back at the field at the end of shift. The cows are back, though none of the officers found them and nobody called in to find them. And remember, paranormal officer has seemingly been driving past the field on a loop all night. The farmer was also unaware when they called to ask him. Totally sounds like the farmer pulled a prank, except it was raining that night, and there were loads of wet mud building at the edge of the field where the gate is, and not footprints or hoof prints, and the cows were dry too. The last story I have the vaguest recollection of, I think it happened some years earlier, and the paranormal officer was called to the discovery site. It is mostly about a different guy, a farmhand who was an immigrant who disappeared without a trace, and then appeared several days later and miles away dead, with burns and another unidentifiable substance all over his body, dumped at the top of a pile of coal. Again, no sign of anyone climbing up the very precarious pile of coal, and no sightings of this farmhand getting from the farm to a different town, one road, and he didn't seem to be on it any point. He was in the same clothes but appeared to have undressed, then been redressed by someone else. Autopsy couldn't find a cause of death, it wasn't the burns, and he was like barely dead, no rigor mortis when discovered. Edit. Should probably add that the official answer to the farmhand death was spontaneous ball lightning, itself a weird theory, and it doesn't explain most of the situation. I'm not saying aliens, but everyone at home is mildly convinced of the aliens. I was a caregiver in a retirement home for 6 months at the beginning of the pandemic. We had one patient, let's call them Robert, that was mute, so when they called us because they needed something, of course we would just hang up and go to their rooms. I had been on vacation for a week, and my coworkers and I didn't have the chance to go over what had happened while I was away. We had 24 patients for 2 caregivers, so we would split the unit in half, 12 residents for each caregiver, and we would help the other if needed. So, the first shift after my vacation, I was taking care of Robert's unit. Few minutes after I arrived, I got a call from Robert's room, so I hang up, finish with my current patient, and calmly walk to the room. When I arrived, the door was locked, which was really unusual since Robert usually leaves the door open. I knock, unlock the door, and open it. To my surprise, the room was pitch black except the television that was turned on. It took me a few minutes to realize that Robert wasn't in the room. So I called my coworker and asked, "Have you seen Robert?" And that's when they told me, "Oh yeah, he passed away 2 days ago." Alright, weird, but not the first time that our system glitches like that, and we get a phone call from an empty room. I go on with my shift like nothing happened. I had left the door open. When I was helping another patient walk to the kitchen, when we passed Robert's room, they said, "Hi Robert, I thought you were at the hospital, welcome back." I was 100% convinced that the room was haunted now. We would get a call from that room a few times a week until Robert was buried, and after that, nothing else happened in that room. We've also had another patient calling us because there was Mike sitting in his chair every night. Mike was the name of the patient that passed away in that room. They had never met. I got called to persistent fire alarms being set off in a block of flats that used to be a poor house in the 1800s. The alarms would go off 3 to 4 times a night at certain times of the year. We arrive and residents are all outside saying they could hear a woman crying. No one wanted to go in as they assumed it was her that was setting the alarms off and she might be crazy. We went up. Yep, sure enough. Could hear a woman crying. Sounded like the stairwell. We went and walked. Crying gets louder. Turned the landing and realized the sound was then below us. It was coming from the top step of the previous flight of stairs. Well, I nearly shat myself. What made it worse was guessing who has just bought a flat on the ground floor and was moving in the following week. Yep, me. I used to bail through the front doors, past the staircase, and into the flat like I was being chased by wolves. Before my actual job in law enforcement, worked security in a college back in 2016. I remember at some point a movement detection alarm tripped in the theater. I'd check up on the cameras and only the lobby had a camera. The lights were flickering, but it seemed intelligent, meaning one light was flickering, then suddenly another one was. I decided to go check it out. All doors were locked magnetically. Lights stopped flickering the second I walked in the room. Creepy stuff. Once worked in a call center very late at night. Around 8 p.m., you'd hear all the doors in the main corridor slamming shut, but the doors didn't open or close all night. Later, we tried to frighten one of the workers by telling them the place was haunted, and found out about a month later that the entire building was on top of a medieval plague pit where they just built over it and left the corpses buried. I work security at night in a luxury condo. I actually started a little over a month ago and I already had a fair share of incidents. Alarms triggered for no apparent reason, finding unusual doors unlocked, random orbs on the cameras, doors slamming while nobody's around, elevator phone started ringing by itself. Former paramedic of 15 years here. I never experienced anything paranormal per se, but I will say when you walk into a room where someone has recently been murdered or committed suicide by violent methods, there's a feeling in the room hard to describe. It's like the air is heavy, thick with malice. You can feel that something is not right. It's probably just my brain subconsciously telling me to get out of there, evolutionarily speaking, but it's the only thing I've ever felt out of the ordinary. I think it's entirely possible we leave something behind when we die. I mean, your personality and consciousness are just a series of electrical signals, right? That's a real thing. My dad used to work at a military fortress. He wasn't serving or anything, but his company, such that it was based there and such, they had custodial duties to the base. One occasion I remember him going on about was around New Year's one year, and he was working quite late. So it was dark when he left. To be honest, I think it was only around 7 p.m., but the sun sets at like 3:30 p.m. in that part of the world in winter. On the drive home, he realized he'd forgotten his phone, so he turned around to go and get it. He parked up and walked through the glacis, over the drawbridge, and through the arch, which brought him into the main square from where his office was visible on the top floor of the block on the right. He noticed then that the light was still on in one of the end rooms of the office. I recalled it was some kind of storeroom. It was odd, he thought, because he'd been the last one out and had locked up, so his first thought was that he'd locked someone in. When he got up there, though, the lights were all off and nobody was about. He received his phone in quick order and left in a little more than a hurry. There were other happenings too, which didn't involve my dad. On one occasion, his boss came in one morning to complain from the night cleaner, accusing him of peeking at him from behind closed doors, hiding, giggling, and flicking lights on and off, which was obviously a surprise because he'd been at home all night. The army occupied other floors in the block and other blocks in the camp, and often complained about loud parties from the office which never happened, plus soldiers regularly seeing apparitions among countless other spooky things. My coworker used to be a security guard for the forensic mental health unit nearby. It used to be a mental asylum and was renowned for treating its patients horribly. There's a graveyard nearby with over 200 unmarked graves for bodies they exhumed on the old asylum grounds. A lot of people would try to sneak into the old abandoned buildings and my coworker and his partner would get deployed to tell them to piss off or to check it out to make sure no one was there, and he said very regularly he would feel spirits, see unexplained movement, and hear screaming, especially in the treatment and intake rooms. I'm not very spiritual, but I totally believe him. That place has a lot of sad history behind it.